Okay, so I'm doing a video that's going to basically be the beer testing. So we're looking at probably about day 5 after I bottled the beer. And so there's a video up that talks about this and the whole process and all of that. But basically what I did was I bottled all the beers. I probably got about 53 or so. The kit makes about 6 gallons. And I probably did about 5.5 gallons total. So it gave me a little more than the normal range that I normally would get. So I have a large Mr. Beer plastic bottle that I have too that I filled up. I also was able to get a full glass of beer also from that. And then I was able to get like 53 bottles, I believe, or so. Quite a bit. And so I've already tasted it and everything else. I tasted it on day 3 after bottling. It was pretty good, but it was pretty flat. And so I was concerned because I left the beer actually in the secondary for a long time, longer than what I intended. But then after I started bottling and when I actually poured the first pour, I noticed that the yeast was very, very high in the cup. Remember, I poured it in a glass, and that was the first bit that came through. And when you put in the siphoning tube, basically it stirs stuff up, and so that was kind of in the suspension of everything. Now, I did use a Warflock tablet, which is designed to keep the sediments down, supposedly. But when you're making this type of beer that I'm making, it's more for an all grain type of beer. People who brew beer know what I'm talking about. But if it's an all grain, that's when you want to use that. There are other beer kits I'm going to get other than these just basic, simple Coopers, which is what this is, that I used to get back in the day. And you would actually have a mescaline bag and you would pour your grains in that. You would steep them. It's a long process. And that is fun. That's fun to do. That's more of something I'm going to do this winter when it gets colder because having the stove on and it's very hot like that, it really and truly makes the house hot. And we don't have air conditioning here, so it makes it even worse. When I lived in New Mexico, it was kind of challenging to do because the water at the house never got super cold. Here, the water is freezing cold. And when you actually do the brewing in that process, basically you have to chill down the wort before you can pitch it because it's boiling water. So you have to chill that down because otherwise you're going to kill the yeast when you actually do it. And I can never get water cold enough. And it wasn't just my house. I went to a friend's house. We brewed beer. He had the same issue. The water there is just not as cold as here. Here, is just cold. Very, very cold. Freezing cold. So that helps in the process of making the beer, just helping it chill down a lot faster. Now, of course, you can get the more expensive stuff now that I'm getting into a little bit more again. You have a wort chiller that you can use. Basically, it's this copper tube that's kind of like a coil, and it goes through and puts cold water through the system of the beer, puts it through the wort, which is the beer, and it cools it down on the inside because when you're trying to cool the beer, and this is way too much information, but when you're trying to cool the beer down and you have it in a one of the quart cooking kettles, and you put the lid on it, basically the water and ice in your sink is supposed to cool it down, but it takes a long time to do that. And of course, a lot of amateur brew makers like myself are impatient, so the wort chiller helps, right? It's just another one of those little gadgets I'm going to eventually get, but definitely wanting to get a keg system so I can get this done quicker. I'm going to be ordering another beer so that I can have it processing, probably a small beer that I can use in my old Mr. Beer kit. So it's going to be a test 1 gallon making type deal. Mr. Beer makes about 2 gallons. And so I can have that on the side. I'm going through beer pretty quickly. Noel had one tonight, had this one. And so it was really, really good. So now I'm going to open this beer and stop yapping, but just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of an idea. We're on day 5 now after I bottled this. I'm in the office, and we moved this little table in here in the office. It's good to play cards and stuff like that. So when I have friends over, this is where we'll be. Also, the girls, this is where they're going to be when they're studying. So this is a good room, internet, and all that stuff's available. So it's perfect. So let's pop this open. This is a pretty cool bottle opener, by the way. Uh, Noelle's brother-in-law got her this years ago, and so I inherited it, and it's pretty cool. So look at the steam that came off of that. I don't know if you can see it. See that smoke? So that smoke means that it is, you can see the bubbles already, means that it's carbonated. So let's go ahead and pour this in there. So remember before, you see it's already got carbonation. Remember before, when I did this, there was hardly any sort of carbonation. Now, you're not going to get a tremendous amount of head on this. Different beers are different, right? Let me angle this back up again now. Different beers, are going to be different in terms of how much head you have on them. And I don't really care. The first one I poured it kind of quick. If I poured it faster, it would obviously have more head and it would die down a little bit. But this lets me know it's carbonated. You can see that little bit of bubbleage there. Now, technically, a lot of brewers like to wait at least a week and a half. Technically, they say it's carbonated by a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, but they like to wait a week and a half, 2 weeks after bottling it so that it can be full carbonation, right? You put it in the fridge to kill off the rest of that yeast, because yeast, once it gets so cold, it basically just stops working. And likewise, if it gets too hot, like in the case of boiling water, it dies, obviously. So putting it in the fridge actually cools it down. There are some, as you're making beer, this is another tangent, where you can cold crash beer, and it's fine to do that. But that's a different thing. But anyhow, let's take a test and see what it tastes like. That's really good. Now, this is a ruby red. Now, before, you can't really see. Before, there was stuff swimming around in the glass, right? Now, there's not that situation. There's nothing swimming around, nothing floating in this. This is really, really good. And technically, the other thing I like to do is look down at the bottom. At the bottom, there's typically a lot of sediment, and there is. You can't really see it, but there's a lot of sediment in the bottom of the bottle, and that's completely normal for beer to do that, especially homebrew. Blue Moon is kind of that way too. But it's totally normal for that to happen. It's literally all the yeast and everything else that's actually at the bottom. Settled out at the bottom. You don't want to drink that. Some people do. Some people leave a little bit in there. They leave about that much. You see where that bump is? Kinda. They'll pour everything up until that point, because basically as you pour it, you don't want to disturb that and, jostle that yeast around and get it inside the beer. Because literally you're going to be drinking a lot of that yeast. If the yeast is still somewhat active, it's going to give you a lot of gas. That's the only downside, is that you're going to have a lot of burping and a lot of other things going on. But it's not a big deal. I like it because it annoys Noelle when I'm in the bed at night and letting them off. She hates it, so I get a kick out of it. But hold on, I'm sorry I'm jostling you guys around again. Let's turn this here again so you can actually see in there. I don't know how good you can see, but it is really, really nice. Now, a gentleman that I know on our Discord was talking about he was getting him a Guinness. He was talking on Discord, and I think I don't know if he was moving or not. I can't remember, but he was settling down, and he was saying that he's going to go get him a Guinness. Guinness is one of my favorites. It's not for everyone, obviously. Not a lot of people can handle Guinness. I like dark beers. And this is a ruby red. I like red beers too. Killian's is another one. I can't find Killian's here for some reason, but that is one beer that I really, really like. George Killian. Really, really nice. So I like those. I like porters as well. But like the gentleman said, he's going to make him a blonde. And so I probably will make myself either a wheat type of ale or something. Or I saw something on there which is like, I forget the name of it, but it was like an evil name. And I like beers that have a lot of just heavy hitting stuff. IPAs are okay, but it used to be that IPAs would tear up my stomach. All the different hops that are used sometimes bother me, you know. But I have not made, to my knowledge, I have not made an IPA yet, and that could be something that could be pretty interesting because when you make an IPA, you want to dry hop it, right? So you basically want to put it in there right as you're going into the secondary fermenter, right? So you use a Michelin bag. And so what happens is when you go through and you brew beer, you're adding hops and things like that. And that's the other thing with those kits. With these types of kits, it's already mixed into the stuff. But with the other type of stuff, with all grain, you're adding the hops to it as you brew it at different time intervals because you're basically getting a certain aroma and you're also going for a certain taste. Because the hops, you can have all the same ingredients but different hops, and those hops will change the flavor of the beer and also the smell, the mouthfeel as well. So all of those things change. So when you're doing IPAs, you do all of those different types of hops while you're brewing it. But then when you go to the secondary, you're also going to do what's called dry hopping. And you literally fill I'm sorry, not in the secondary. When you get done brewing it and you're putting it into the bucket to the first fermenter, you basically are going to just leave it there for a few days and let it do its thing. Let the yeast and everything do what it needs to do. And then you're going to put some hops in there. There's different types of hops, right? There's Cascades, there's Centennial, there's tons of them, right? And so you're going to put the hops in there in a Michelin bag and you just let them sit. And what they're going to do is just release the smell over time and release the taste over time. And so then once you go to the secondary, you take them out at that point in time and then you put everything in. So everything is good to go at that point. IPAs usually are going to have like 3 or so different hops in them. So that Noel's not a big IPA fan. I used to not be a big IPA fan. Now I kind of am until they get really crazy and then I can't. The strongest beer I've ever made is probably at a 10 ABV. To give you an idea, Bud Light is like at 4.5. So this was like literally more than double a one Bud. I used to make a lot of those back in the day when I was younger. And I was first starting to brew, I used to make some very heavy, and some people don't even consider 10 heavy. But I used to make some pretty heavy ones, 9.5s, 9.3s, anything greater than 9 I would typically do. Never made anything greater than a 10, but I would like to. And just kind of see what I can do with it. But anyhow, I can go on and on and on. It tastes really, really good. Noel likes this. Like I said, I cracked one open earlier. This is probably about a good 6 just by tasting and that type of thing. I didn't do an actual gravity on it. But just by doing this for a while, I can probably tell you it's probably in the 6 range or so. 6.0 to probably about 6.5 in that range, I would say is where this beer is. So it's a good beer to sip on, but if you drink it a little too fast, you're going to feel it. It definitely, you'll feel it more so than a Bud Light or something like that, or a Coors. But it's not one of those where you drink it and instantly it just punches you. I've had some beers here in Tacoma, which Tacoma has its own brewery district. There are some brewers here that have made beers, and I've tried them at 7 Seas, which is a great place to go. I had one of their beers that they had up there, and just one sip, and instantly you got lightheaded. It was just so strong. So there are some that are really strong, and I think there's one place here that you can only have 2 beers because the stuff is so darn strong. They won't sell you more than that. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. Also, Tacoma's getting into the whole cider scene. I'm going to do a video talking about the brewery district and the cider businesses and the brew businesses that are here. Once everything, as far as the sickness goes away, I may go to some of these different places and just kind of do a tour. I need to have one of my friends here so that I can get around and do a lot of these tastings, but probably go downtown and try a couple of different places and tell you what my favorite is. But anyhow, obviously McMenamins would be one of those places I would go to and test. They have a lot of different beers. McMenamins make their own beer too, so it's Tacoma's definitely a beer city. Anyhow, in the Pacific Northwest is a beer area. Anyhow, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Join our Discord. And until next time, I will see you. Take care.